musicals are quite a hard nut to crack when it comes to film, and I think that Les Miserables made it a lot harder on itself by having a very public feature on its live performances, and the fact that this was going to be a unique musical because all the music sung in it was going to be live. And I think in terms of the live performances, it works really well, but I think in terms of a film in general, it's quite frustrating and incredibly irritating at places. And for that regard, it doesn't really work as a film in my opinion, but it does have some great performances, and it does in some ways work alright. Uh, the film follows Jean Valjean, played by Hugh Jackman, who, after having served 19 years in a labour camp, he is released and he's on parole. He can't really cope with the stigma of being on parole, so he breaks his parole and is chased by Inspector Javert, played by Russell Crowe. And the film follows him as he makes quite a bit of a name for himself as a mayor of a small town and a factory owner, and unfortunately he fails one of his workers, and to make it up he promises to care for her daughter, Cosette, played by Amanda Seyfried. And essentially the film follows him as he seeks redemption through this girl and through his caring for her, but he's always constantly on the lookout, on the run from Russell Crowe's character, Inspector Javert. And I think as a film, as a musical, or as a book, it was quite a complex story, and it had a lot of details to it. And I think, in a way, the fact that it's a musical made it quite hard on the director Tom Hooper to actually manage to convey story successfully, despite the fact that in the musical it's actually quite easy to follow. And I think in the film you have these moments where the whole cast is singing in unison and they're all singing different lines, and these lines have plot details in them that you really need to know, but while you're trying to listen to one set of lines you can't listen to the other. So when you're trying to listen to one specific plot detail or one character detail, you can't listen to the other, so you miss things quite a lot, and it becomes this quite confusing medley of details that you miss, and it ultimately becomes quite a confusing film. Another problem I saw with it was the fact that it didn't really feel like Les Miserables. It didn't really have the themes that you'd expect from the movie, or from a movie based around the musical. It didn't really have those themes of brotherhood, rebellion. Didn't really have the kind of feel of a film that essentially follows a form of social anarchy. And I think in a way it fails the musical uh, ultimately in that regard. But that doesn't make it a bad film, it just means that it didn't really live up to all it could have been. I think it has some amazing characterization. I think the performances in the film are really good. I think that Hugh Jackman is a great lead. I mean, he really immerses himself in the character of Jean Valjean, in the redemption of him. And I think as an actor, he hasn't been better. And I think it's just got this great redemptive arc for him, and it's got this great theme of reimagining people and reimagining a country, and it's got some good themes, but it doesn't really have a depth to it that the musical does. And I think that Anne Hathaway isn't on screen long enough because she is one of the best parts of the film. I mean, the tragic arc of Fantine, the character she portrays, is one of the most profound moments of the movie. And the fact that it only really lasts 15 minutes of a 2.5 hour film is kind of disappointing. Finally, I think there's another great performance, and it really highlights the theme of reinvention, or in his case, failure to reinvent, and that's Russell Crowe as Inspector Javert, who who has this great dynamic with Hugh Jackman. They really mesh together quite well, and it's a great performance. And I think some people had problem with his singing voice, and I think it doesn't really matter when you've got a performance like that. It's a really good one, and I think I don't really qualify the complaints about it, because I was concentrating more on the performance than the singing, and I thought the singing was fine nonetheless. But ultimately, it's quite a frustrating movie, and I think at times it can be quite profound. It's profound in passing, if you know what I mean. And I think it can be very heartfelt and very moving, especially when Anne Hathaway's on screen and when Fantine's on screen. But I think that ultimately it's so frustrating, and I think it's got a good ending in the fact that it manages to make what's been 2.5 hours of pretty abject misery quite joyous, in the fact that these characters are all brought back together in a way. And I think ultimately that the end kind of makes the film worth it, despite the fact that, if you think about it, the moment of happiness that you get is only really for a moment. You only really get it for a second, and then you start thinking about the film again, and you realise that a lot of these characters really didn't get the arc that they deserved and the arc that the musical gives them. And I think that ultimately that's why I didn't enjoy it as much as I should have. And that's how I felt about Les Mis.